I call the member for Gippsland.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And I rise to speak in relation to the report by the Parliamentary Joint Committee on the Australian Commission for Law Enforcement Integrity's inquiry into law enforcement integrity models. And I note the presence of the member for Werriwa. I hope I get my facts straight and reflect fairly on the committee's hard work. I give credit from the outset, Deputy Speaker, to the chair of the committee, the member for Fremantle, and all of my parliamentary colleagues for the spirit of bipartisanship and the professionalism which has typified our work on this committee. It has been, as a new member to this place, it has been very satisfying and professionally rewarding to be involved in such productive work, and I give much credit to the member for Fremantle's level-headed approach and even-handed treatment of all members, and it's all credit to her in that regard. I'd also like to thank the committee secretariat and the staff for their outstanding support over the months of the inquiry, and thank the people who appeared before the committee for their insights, their forthright comments, and for the submissions they made, which have guided the committee in its report. Now, as I said, Deputy Speaker, as a relative newcomer to the committee, I missed some of the early stages of the inquiry, but I've appreciated the willingness of the other committee members and support staff to bring me up to speed on the issues of interest. And ACLEI itself is also relatively a newcomer to Australian public life, and it's worth reminding the House that it was formed to provide oversight of the Commonwealth law enforcement agencies, the Australian Federal Police and the Australian Crime Commission. And unlike many of the state-based agencies which were formed as a response to evidence of major corruption or other incidents relating to law enforcement, ACLEI was not created because of any findings of corruption or misconduct in these agencies. It doesn't mean, of course, that a level of corruption doesn't exist, but it is worth emphasising that ACLEI came about more as a preemptive measure, and I believe it's inevitable that it will need to expand its role in the future, particularly I believe in the areas of prevention and education. During the inquiry, and as the report before the House reflects, a number of witnesses argued for a stronger corruption education and prevention role or focus for ACLEI itself. And ACLEI has noted that it has limited capacity to advertise widely at the moment, but its awareness-raising activities undertaken so far have produced results, and the agency has experienced an increase in the flow of information to it. Deputy Speaker, I believe the big issues for the future will undoubtedly be the level of resources provided to ACLEI and the agencies for which it has oversight. In terms of resources, the report recommends that the Australian Government undertake a review of ACLEI's funding levels as a matter of urgency, and I wholeheartedly support that recommendation, and not in any political or partisan way. I believe that it's inevitable in the future ACLEI is going to require more resources to undertake the work it is expected to do. As I understand, the decision to establish ACLEI in the first place, it was always intended as a building blocks approach. It was expected that ACLEI would establish itself and get a direct understanding of the task at hand, and the funding requirements to fulfil that role may well flow out of that experience. And by starting small, the Commissioner Philip Morris and his team have been in a position to build relationships with the agencies in what has been described, and is reflected in the report, as an integrity partnership, and I think that's a good model going forward. And as I mentioned previously, ACLEI was not formed in response to some cataclysmic event, but as witnesses to the inquiry reported, it's wrong to suggest that corruption does not exist within these agencies. The Commonwealth Ombudsman, Professor John McMillan, commented to the inquiry, and I quote, "I am strongly of the view that it is misguided to work from the premise that we have not seen corruption and therefore that it does not exist and is not a problem. Firstly, corruption has been a problem for every police force internationally, and it would be wrong to assume that it cannot be a problem for any policing agency in Australia. And the creation of ACLEI, Deputy Speaker, has been a precautionary policy, and I strongly support the recommendations which deal with the issue of future funding and resourcing for the organisation." Just by way of reference, in 2007-2008, there were 8 ongoing staff at ACLEI and 6 casual or seconded staff. And as a matter of comparison, ACLEI has an oversight role for the Australian Federal Police, which has 6,598 staff, and the Australian Crime Commission, which has 585 staff. Given its main purpose of enhancing the integrity of Commonwealth law enforcement agencies by providing independent and effective external investigation of possible instances of corruption, this quite small staff at ACLEI has a very large job on its hands. Another one of the key recommendations in this report, which goes directly to the task of ACLEI performing its role, is the issue of a secure hearing room. The committee has recommended that the government fund a secure hearing room and associated technical infrastructure and personnel support as a matter of priority. It's a significant issue in terms of the independence of ACLEI and its capacity to hold its own investigation without relying on the facilities of other agencies, as is currently the case. The committee noted that a secure hearing room is one of the fundamental building blocks for ACLEI, and it considers that there would be important practical and symbolic benefits to the effectiveness of the integrity system if ACLEI had its own purpose-built hearing room here in Canberra. An on-site hearing room would allow ACLEI to hold investigations as necessary rather than subject to the availability of other facilities. Deputy Speaker, I freely acknowledge that all this will cost money in an environment of very difficult economic circumstances. I think members on all sides would place a high value on the anti-corruption initiatives undertaken by ACLEI and would appreciate the importance of the work that has been undertaken by the organisation. I'd also like to acknowledge that ACLEI has received a significant budget increase in the past, but it was the committee's view, and one that I fully support, that ACLEI is not sufficiently resourced to meet its increasing workload or to deliver adequately on its designated output. And without wishing to preempt in any way future decisions, it is highly likely that ACLEI will expand into other appropriate jurisdictions in the future, and it needs to be fully funded and appropriately resourced to fulfil that role. In closing, Deputy Speaker, I would like to reiterate my thanks to the Chair and to my fellow committee members for their work, along with the support staff. It is the first report that I've been part of in this place, and I look forward to continuing the positive working relationship within the Parliamentary Joint Committee on the Australian Commission for Law Enforcement Integrity, and I commend the report to the House.